There are businesses that will pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars per year passively, hiding in plain sight. These are gold nuggets because they are small, boring businesses that big investors wouldn't even think about touching. And they're 100% accessible to people like you and me. Oh, and I forgot, you can acquire these with little to zero of your own money. This video is going to cover the exact process that I've used to acquire 7 businesses that will pay me $850,000 a year in cash flow. So make sure to pay attention to this guide. Before we dive into our search for businesses, let's clear something up. We are only going after businesses that meet these specific criteria. I call these the 3 pillars. We're looking for a business that is recession resistant, has recurring revenue, and has a barrier to entry. Now, what do these mean? Recession resistance means we're going after businesses that only offer an essential service, meaning if you had your salary cut in half tomorrow, what are the things that you would still be paying for? Those are the type of businesses we want to invest in. The second is recurring revenue. We want to make sure that if our business brings on a customer, that customer is going to keep on paying us again and again and again. So we're looking for businesses that have a service that people are going to use multiple times a year because it's such a great service and it does something essential for them. The last is a barrier to entry. We want businesses where it's not easy to compete against. We want something that is going to cost a substantial amount of money in the infrastructure, in the hiring, in the equipment usage to even think about competing against you and your business. Pick a business that has a barrier to entry to make sure that you're limiting the amount of competitors going after your clients. Now that you have a better understanding of the type of businesses I'm going after, we're going to go live onto BizBuySell.com and I'm going to expose my exact strategy on how I find these exact businesses. All right, everyone, we're going to do our search on BizBuySell.com, which you see right here on the screen. This is the most popular website by far right now. It has more listings than any other site, and it's also the most active. So we're going to do our training utilizing this site. So we're going to put in BizBuySell.com. We're going to come right here to the main page. For the example we're going to do right here, we're going to use the state of Florida, and don't choose your industry just yet. I want to show you all the different types of businesses that are going to come when we choose search. So hit search. It's going to open it up. The next thing we want to do is go up to our filters. Okay, so you want to go up to the filters and you want to do this. Go to price range. Right now, we're going to look between 500,000 on the low end and $1 million on the high end. Going to apply. Then we're going to go to more filters and you're going to go down to cash flow. We want to see a minimum of 150K in cash flow. We don't want to see any franchise opportunities because if you don't click this, you're going to see a bunch. So we're going to get that out of the way. You're going to hit apply. So now we're looking at the listings that are going to come up after we put in those filters. So as you can see on the right-hand side, it shows the price in bold and then below it shows cash flow for the amount for that business. So we're going to look down and find one that makes sense right here. HVAC business and sale in Florida. We like HVAC because it's recession resistant, recurring revenue with the maintenance contracts, and there's a barrier to entry because of licensing and equipment as a barrier. First thing we're going to look at is the golden ratio. The way you do your golden ratio is you get your calculator right here and you're going to take the cash flow number, which right here is 150K, and you are going to divide that into the revenue, which is 1.135 million. And that's going to give you 13%. The golden ratio is between 15 and 35%. So this is coming in below it. And the reason why we like 15 and 35% for the golden ratio is because businesses that fall within that metric typically, especially at the sizes that we're looking at, will have a middle level of management already in existence. So you have the owner, you have mid-level management that's managing the day-to-day, and that's key because we're not buying a job. We want to buy a business that does have a team that is already in place. So when you show a margin that's below that, that probably means he might have some mid-level management because he has high expense rates, but the margin's getting too tight. And we're going to take on debt service to buy this, which means we're going to have debt payments on top of this. And that margin is going to get tighter and tighter. And if it gets too tight, we're not interested. So, but right now, we're pretty close to that 15%. We're at 13%. And I want to find out why they're at that low of profit margin. So let's go down. So now we see that we have the 2024 all the way down to 2020 in terms of their revenue and cash flow. So if we look at here in 2020, they did around 940. 21, they did around 1.1. In 22, they did between 1.04. And in 23, they did 1.135. So the revenue has been pretty stagnant. It really hasn't increased that much since 2020. But their cash flow has been steadily decreasing this entire time. They hit a high in 21 at 250, and then it went down to 170. Now it went to 150 last year. And right now they're on track pretty much for another 150. So I don't get worried when businesses show consistent revenue because a lot of times these small businesses, the owners only grow to the part where they can handle it. They don't want to grow bigger. They're making a nice living for themselves. They don't want to be more busy. They don't know how to kind of add another level of management and remove themselves from day-to-day operations completely. So they just stick at that point. So the revenue doesn't worry me. The cash cash flow decreasing every year does. Now, I'm hoping that this means that he's been spending more money and time on hiring, hopefully bringing on a full-time GM that's able to manage the day-to-day. If that's the answer to the question when we ask it to the broker, and the broker down here is Mr. Larry Lawson, if we ask him why this is happening and he tells us, oh, it's because the owner has been preparing for the sale, he's been hiring extra people, he's been taking himself out of the day-to-day so that he can more just take time to relax and get ready for retirement, that's a good answer we want to hear. Obviously, in due diligence, we're going to back all those claims. We're going to have to find the data to support it. But for right now, we're looking at this. This is good enough to move to the next part. Let's move on down. So it tells us it's been around for 20 years. They got over 250 manufacturer-backed warranty agreements. They're working with the industry's top vendors. They have a loyal customer base. They have a brand new facility. And if we look at this, the business has been pre-qualified for SBA financing. What this means is that an SBA lender has already gotten their financials from the broker and said, yeah, we would lend to a buyer to buy this exact business. Well, that tells you that this business has already passed a lot of those checks. So the books are clean enough, the tax returns are clean enough to where you can get a loan to buy this. That's good news. So then we move on down, and it really doesn't give us any more information. So the big question that came out of this, remember, when you're looking at a listing like this, the big questions you want to answer is, one, is there enough cash flow here after debt service to make me happy? Now, personally, if I'm looking at this deal after debt service, this thing is going to be below $100,000 a year in cash flow to me. I'm not interested. But for someone who is okay with that, or someone who's a little bit more okay with being involved in potentially some day-to-day activities, this might still be a good deal. So at this point, my main question is, revenue has been fairly consistent, really hasn't grown that much. The cash flow has been steadily decreasing the last few years. Why? And if the answer from the broker is like, oh, inflation, things get more expensive, that's not a good answer. And at that point, I probably would lose all interest in this deal. We want to make sure that they answer back with, oh, he's been systematizing, he's been bringing in more operational help, he brought on a full-time GM, and that is why from 2021 to 2023, the cash flow has dropped $100,000. If that's the answer, we may still be interested. The next step is you to talk to that broker, get the answer to those questions, ask for the SIM, the confidential information memorandum, which he will then have you sign an NDA to get. You get that, and that's going to be an in-detail breakdown of this entire business for the last 3 years, but specifically probably its entire history. And that's where you're going to probably get most of the answers to the questions that you have. With this process, this took me about 5 minutes to do. Go through, figure out what your buy box is, figuring out what type of things to look for, make sure you're looking at the golden ratio, make sure you're taking the time to read through the listing, coming up with your questions, reaching out to the broker, and have a very focused conversation about the questions you have. Don't just call them up and say, hey, tell me about the business. That shows that you're not serious. If you call him up and say, hey, I had this specific question about the revenue and cash flow, it's going to show you're serious, and he's going to take the time of the day to work with you because you're going to be a client that he thinks that can actually close this deal with him. Now that you've narrowed down your search to a few businesses that you're interested in, it's time to start making offers. But as I mentioned before, you are not going to be doing this with your own money. You'll be using what's called an SBA loan, which I just did a full guide on. This is the next step in acquiring your first business. That could add an extra $100,000 a year in income and even replace your full-time job. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.